Hi everyone, my name is Micah McLean and you are watching Micah McLean Talks. Today you are watching my interview with Andy George. Please remember to like, share, subscribe and comment, and I hope you enjoy the interview. So, Andy George, thank you so much for coming onto the platform. You are a detective in the Met Police, but you're also the president of the National Black Police Association. So, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, how you doing? It's just I'm actually a police officer in the police service of Northern Ireland.
Okay, thank you so much just for clarifying that. Thank you. So, please tell us about your early life growing up and what drove your decision to become a police officer.
Yeah, I think for me growing up in Northern Ireland in particular, there weren't too many people that looked like me, as you can imagine. So we were only one of about two families that in the entire town that were from a visible ethnic minority. So the whole bit I kind of had was I was the eldest in the family, the first person to kind of go to school. I had different people trying to bully me. I had people waiting outside school to jump me and beat me up near enough every day throughout my life. Ended up that had a profound impact because for me, I had to shield my brothers and sisters from that. I had two younger sisters and a younger brother, so I think that's probably part of what kind of drove me to be a police officer. That protection. A lot of my friends, mums and dads at the time were in the police service as well. I would say whenever I joined policing in Northern Ireland, I was probably one of 5 to 10 officers from a minority ethnic background in 13,500 police at the time. But I was also one of the 92% from a Protestant background. So all of my friends, that made up 92% of the Royal Ulster Constabulary at the time. So a lot of my friends' relatives were in policing. And my best friend, actually, both of us applied at the same time. So I think it was that coupled of that sense of looking after those that couldn't look after themselves and then falling into it with friends as well.
Thank you so much for that. And please, can you just draw about us more about your experiences being in the police, being a officer of an ethnic minority? Could you please just talk us through those experiences?
No, completely. Whenever I first joined in 1999, so coming up in 24 years this year. I was only 20 years old whenever I went in. Had suffered racism, as I said, in society. Suffered it whenever I went into policing as well. The first time I experienced racism in PS or well in policing in Northern Ireland at the time was in the training centre where a sergeant actually put chocolate body paint on a toy at a Secret Santa event on a Christmas do that we were having. Told me that it looked a little bit more like me then as well. I was
Right.
also told that I should be really good at playing darts at the time from my spear throwing days. A lot of different things. It was like whenever then I went out to the first station that I was at, it was almost an anomaly me being there. So people didn't really know what to make of you. I kind of use that experience all the time because I would say people, whenever they look at me, they see the difference in Northern Ireland. So they did anyway. They seen the difference and that was all they could see. But as you ended up getting to know them, there was almost like this tipping point and they started to see the similarities and that's where they would accept you. So there was always this bit where they would see the difference initially. They would ask me stuff. I mean, like it was, every time that somebody got assaulted in work, they would ask me if I get a white eye rather than a black eye. Every time you went away on holidays or on leave, they would tell you that you're coming back with some tan. And just things like that, it carried on for quite a while. But at the same time, I was also really accepted and made to feel part of the team. So it's strange how you can feel part of the team, you can be accepted as an officer, but you can still have that racial kind of discrimination and that racial terminology throughout the police service. But for me, I was 8 years in the response team, so literally dealing with emergency and priority calls. So everything from domestic violence to fights in the street to dealing with stop and search and things like that. I then in 2008 went into the armed response unit. So for 10 years, I was an armed response officer in PSNI, armed response in our ARV unit. We had about 60 officers that were trained up to be armed response officers. So I was one of 60 officers in the entire PSNI that was trained up to deal with gun and knife crime in the armed response unit. So all we did was deal with spontaneous firearms calls. So if somebody was in the house with a firearm or with a knife or on the street and we had no forewarning of that, then we would have to go and intercept them. So used our firearms, had less lethal weapons, and we were always negotiating with people. So my role obviously as president, that has led to a lot of people saying that because I'm president and because I'm pushing for policing to do better around race equity, that I must not be a proper police officer as well. But I've been there, I've done it. I ended up getting hit by a car at a riot in the Ardoyne in Belfast in 2015. Ended up a young girl trapped underneath the vehicle. I dislocated my knee, stayed on duty for 3 hours after that. Helped lift the car off the young girl as well, and then stood with a crowd of 200 coming towards us to keep a safe and sterile area for that young girl to get first aid. So lots of things that have happened. I've also, saved a colleague's life who had a heart attack after we'd done a PCA and they put the respirator on. So a number of different things that have happened along the way, but largely my experience of being a police officer has been really, really good and really, really positive. And it's something that I've always loved doing, still have the passion for it now, even after 24 years. But the racism, unfortunately, and that poor culture has been present throughout my career.
Thank you so much for that and just your courage in speaking up about your experiences. So you've been the president of the National Black Police Association since 2020. What do you think are some of the key challenges police officers face when working either for the Met Police or the Belfast Police or any police force really?
Well, I often get brought into the arguments with the Met Police. Lots of people think I'm anti-Met because that ends up almost tainting the view of things in general. For me, I think the Met is the kind of the epicenter on race relations because it's where our largest Black communities are. It's where a lot of the issues have. So whenever you have a large congregation of people, you're always going to have these issues and they play out a lot more. For the Met Police, I think being president of the MBPA, we're consistently doing three things that are really trying to improve policing. A lot of the time we're seen as a negative and a challenging voice. But the three things that the MBPA really do is support our members. So we look at people from Black, Asian and other minoritized ethnic groups, deal with both police officers and staff members. So we have a presence in just about every police service, law enforcement agency across the UK, in and around 5,000 members. And unfortunately, they suffer a lot of discrimination in the service as well. So they're less likely to face promotion and get through the promotion process. They're more likely to face misconduct action. And there's various studies around a lot of this stuff. You have around about 8.5% or so of the workforce in England and Wales of police officers come from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds. Whenever you go to superintendent level, that's about 4.5%. And whenever you go to chief officer level, that's at 1%. So lots of issues which we have inside, but we try to kind of get upstream and really do what policing should be doing and everything, which is look at prevention first. So rather than wait for officers to end up in crisis, I would much rather try to change the systems and processes and make sure that they work better for everybody. Second thing we do is give strategic advice and guidance to senior leaders and the other stakeholders. So usually I get the privilege of meeting the Home Secretary, College of Police and CEO. And I do say that one quite ten. I haven't met this Home Secretary just yet. We'll see where that one goes. I know she's not exactly a fan of staff networks and things like that. But, we have proven our worth. We've proven our ability to gain trust and confidence and to give senior leaders that vital information because it's 1% of the workforce are from Black or Asian backgrounds at chief officer level. And you can imagine how limited that viewpoint is for people that look like you or me. That cultural competence, that difference, that really impacts decision making. So the fact that we can relay 5,000 members' experiences, we can then, pick up trends and themes and issues that we're facing, and then we can help policing to kind of work it together in that prevention first element that we're chatting about. And the last thing that we do is the amplify the voice of the community. So the MBPA was formed in the aftermath of Stephen Lawrence's murder, which is 30 years ago this year. We also give evidence to the Stephen Lawrence inquiry held by Lord Macpherson, and that kind of given that perspective from the inside, and speaking in unity with communities as well. And if we're both saying the same things about the same issues, I think that's a really powerful message, and it's something I'm really passionate about. So for me, it's how we can do that so much better. And again, for me, what I've tried to do is work with policing more than what we used to. I've really, I suppose, tried to change the terminology and how we're viewed. So we were always seen as critical friends in the past. And I always say, who wants a critical friend around them? I don't want somebody following me around telling me that I've aged immensely from I've become president, telling me that I've put on lots of weight after COVID. Who wants a friend like that around them? So what I keep saying is a critical friend puts us outside the police family. It puts us at the end of a process. For me, I've changed that and tried to change the terminology around that to being a cultural asset. And if you're a cultural asset, for me, that puts us firmly inside the police family, because we love being police officers, police staff members. We love the job that we do. We just want it to be better and better for the communities and families that we come from. But if you change that, then that puts you at the start of a process. It means that we can co-develop, co-design and co-deliver policies and practices together. And that's where I think the collaboration between the lived experience of our members coupled with the expertise of policing, that's where I think we really do identify really insidious problems of racism and discrimination in policing. And then that's how we also find the meaningful and impactful solutions for those as well.
Victoria. She was my youngest sibling, and probably the one I was closest to growing up. In fact, we were so close that she used to ring my house to find out what we were having for dinner before ringing mum and dad's to find out what they were having. And only then would she choose where she was going to dine that evening. Clever girl. She was a lovable girl and only ever wanted to be loved and accepted by everybody that she met. Unfortunately, as is often the case, people couldn't see beyond her race, and she was bullied at school. This bullying continued into her adult life, and over time I started to notice that she would racially abuse herself and call herself racial slurs. I spoke to her about this on many occasions and told her that if she didn't want to be called those names, that she shouldn't mention them or talk about them herself. But unfortunately, this was her coping mechanism. She was forced to self-deprecate and take part in the abuse to be part of that group. Unfortunately, however, even that coping mechanism wasn't enough, and in 2010, she took her own life. You see, people can often laugh off the joke, but you never know how isolated or alone they feel when they're the only person from an ethnic minority standing in that room. Social pressures and the need to conform can often make us give up behaviours that make us who we are. That is not a reflection of an inclusive society, and we must embrace the difference that a diverse society or workforce can bring. If we ever hope to change society, we must embrace the benefits that difference can bring. Before I finish up, I just want to leave you with 3 lessons that you can take home with you related to the 3 stories that I've just told you. The first one relates to me at the circus. The lesson I wanted you to take from that is that silent behaviours and passive behaviours in the face of racism only gives it strength. Racists are bullies, and when they're challenged, it takes their power away. That 6-year-old child didn't have anybody to come forward and support them. But moving forward, you can now change the outcome for the next person that you hear that's been the victim of racist abuse. The second lesson I want to leave you with is related to me growing up in school being attacked. And what I want you to remember is if you're ever dealing with someone that says they've been the victim of racist abuse, don't just dismiss them because they may have been a little aggressive in how they've reacted. If you're open-minded enough and just listen to them, you might find that they are indeed the victim, and all they want is for their hurt to be acknowledged. I know that's all I wanted as I was sat outside the principal's office. And the last one that I want to leave you with is in relation to my sister Victoria, or Vicky. She'd kill me for calling her Victoria. In relation to that one, I want you to remember that you should never ever believe that racist abuse is okay. People may well laugh off the abuse in certain circumstances, but you never know how vulnerable they feel whenever they're the only one being laughed at. My sister is proof that victims of racism are vulnerable, and all vulnerable people need a shoulder to cry on and someone to support them. Racism manifests and thrives when it remains unchecked, even in its lowest forms. We all hold racial biases, and if we ever hope to prevent the evil consequences that racism can lead to, we must admit that they exist. If we do actually admit that they exist, it'll allow us to make decisions that extend beyond ourselves and to reach the best possible outcome for all involved. And if we manage to do that, then you will actually see that people from an ethnic minority, we are all people. We are all fathers. We are all mothers. We are all brothers. We are all sisters. We are you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And one thing I've always found quite encouraging about you is that you're very courageous, you're very bold, you have a tenacity about you that you just keep pushing, and that's just so great to see.
Oh, completely. For me, it's about not losing hope. You know what I mean? I'm always hopeful. You always have to be optimistic, and then, yes, as you said, a lot of people, whenever they look at my Twitter feed in particular, it gets it. I was even in Somerset yesterday, and a lot of people were saying, whenever I first took over, I had lots of people saying, why are you engaging? You're giving people oxygen and you're interacting. But for me, I get attacked by quite a few retired police officers. I get attacked by quite a few anonymous accounts. But for me, I never allowed bullies to win whenever I was growing up, and I'm not going to allow that to happen now. So for me, I will continue to push. I'll be respectful. I always kind of interact as best I can and just allow people to maybe think about what they're actually saying or doing and question, their own thought processes. I'm always open to doing that myself, but definitely I'm never going to stand back and just allow somebody to attack either me or members, certainly not our communities as well. So definitely for me, it's just about doing what police officers should do, call out injustice where they see it and do the right thing, I think. And we'd all be in a better place if we all followed that mantra.
Thank you so much. And I was actually reading an article from The Guardian, which leads on to my next question, that Mark Rowley reportedly refused to meet you. So what are your thoughts on this?
He has since met. I will put that in there. And as I said, I think it was surprising that he didn't want to meet me, if I'm honest, at the time. I think different reasons for that. Surprising given the fact that he is coming in to an organisation that their previous commissioner was basically lost confidence because she wasn't listening and empathising with what was being said or done. And I think he needed to work with all of those other challenging voices. He needed to work with people that he may not actually agree with, and he may have judged me off the Twitter feed and off different news bulletins. But whenever you get me in a room, I'm actually, as you said, full of energy. I'm there to try and work with policing. And he could have seen us as a cultural asset. I think he's seen us more as a critical friend and too hard to do box. But then he did meet us because they were looking to take on the race action plan lead at that point, and they needed our permission and the permission of the Independent Scrutiny and Oversight Board. So we did have a discussion, quite an open discussion as well. Still looking forward to a second meeting. And as I said, it's the new Metropolitan Black Police Association chair has just come in. He's just come in October. He's still waiting for a one-to-one with Sir Mark Rowley as well. So for us, we're heavily embedded in the race action plan. We're heavily embedded and we're working collaboratively with the College of Policing, with the National Police Chiefs Council, and we have seen so much more traction nationally. So it's really disappointing that we haven't seen the same collaboration in the Metropolitan Police. But, again, the hope will always shine through. Hopefully, he will see the benefit. Hopefully we can work together more, because for me, most officers in the Met, those frontline officers, are doing the best they can. And I think it's just that lack of acknowledgement of the issues and giving them the tools to make better decisions and to understand Black communities a lot better, I think that's what's holding back policing in London at the minute.
Thank you so much. And one thing that was also very scary is by several newspapers, it was reported that last month alone, it was reported that more than 150 officers were investigated for either racism or sexual misconduct. What reforms do you think the Met or other police forces can implement to challenge this negative culture and increase public trust?
I think we'll always chat about representation. The representation of our public or professional standards departments is our majority white colleagues. There's very few Black, Asian, minority ethnic officers or staff members in there. So I think that's one part of it. What I found with Northern Ireland and how we've changed the representation, there also needs to be a culture shift. I think both work together. If you get more people in, if you have 2 or 3 people in, they're less likely to speak out. They're more likely to conform. And if you have enough people coming in, then they will start to speak up again, or speak that truth to power, which will help come up with, better solutions and widen the scope of investigations. For me personally, and for the National Black Police Association, our position is now we need fundamental reforms over the internal misconduct system and over our grievances as well, because very few of our race discrimination grievances are ever found in the grievance favour. They generally go to employment tribunal. And I think we need to cut those off at an early stage. We need to empower officers that hear racism, misogynistic language or behaviours. They need to report that at an early stage. And I think we could potentially move people away from issues. We could educate them under restorative justice practices potentially. But I think that's for low level stuff. For the higher stuff, what I think we actually need is independent oversight of the police misconduct system and of the grievances, because I think there is just too much potential for decision makers to find in the favour or to err on the side of the service to protect its reputation rather than to weed out those that are letting the service down. So that independence or independent oversight needs to come from a body like the IOPC, but built up of professionals, have that representation right at the start, make sure they're trained in employment law and in misconduct properly, and that they can investigate things. And I think if we had that independent oversight, transparency in what's being investigated, if we tracked and traced them better as well. So what we don't do an awful lot is the proactive work that we do in policing. Whenever we find patterns of behaviour, so if we suddenly find that a particular department has a lot of discrimination cases, a lot of misconduct cases coming out, then we can target interventions to that particular area. But at this minute in time, policing are more concerned with containing stories. They deal with racism more like a PR issue rather than the issue that it is, the insidious evil that racism actually is. We need to actually stop worrying about the reputation of the organisation, stop worrying about the potential litigation which might come further down the line, and just have an independent, open investigation and allow the evidence to kind of lead us to where we need to be. Then people that want to behave in that manner will be held to account, and people will feel more empowered to speak up and challenge them at the earliest opportunity.
I think that probably one thing that a lot of people may consider, especially from my community, is the amount of cases that have been talked about in the media just in the last 6 months or even longer. Sarah Everard, Chris Cabba. It's just shocking. So what steps do you think the Met needs to take to kind of weed out those kind of people? Because think about 150 officers, that's not a small number. That's quite big within a month.
It's quite big, but again, some of these issues have been long-standing issues. They're not new. They're just coming into the light a lot more. You know what I mean? Like Dave Carrick, Wayne Couzens, that they got away with certain behaviours for 20 plus years. And I keep saying that police officers are a lot like children at times. They operate within the boundaries which you set, and they will always try to push the boundaries. It's up to senior leadership teams. It's up to those in positions of power to make sure that the boundaries are set quite tight and that they're enforced. And I think that's what we need to be looking at. But for me, it is quite a high number, but it's a high number being reported on. You look at Baroness Casey's review or interim report into the Professional Standards Department, the ASE and the Met. 2017, the Metropolitan Black Police Association done a whistleblowing complaint to the IOPC about the Professional Standards Departments. The IOPC investigated that in 2018 and found nothing. Found no disparity, no racial profiling, nothing within that. And literally 3-4 years later, Baroness Casey reviews the same data and finds that there is racial equality or racial disparity throughout the system. And that's what we were saying all along. So we need these external reviews to come in. We need to make sure that's why I say that independent oversight needs to be there, because whenever policing's left to the police, for us to police ourselves, we always get it wrong, which is why the IOPC was set up as well. Now we need to make sure that we have it now, because once that light is shined off us again, then my fear is that those behaviours will be allowed to breed again. They'll be allowed to continue on check. So, it's keeping the pressure on. It is really disappointing, though, as you said, whenever you constantly get this churn of people coming forward, as you said, in really big cases, not just, small, low-level incidents, the Server Everard murder, the investigation or the killing of Chris Cabba. All of these kind of things are big issues, big impacts, and there's a lot of questions to be answered around them. The Bianca Williams stop and some of the things around that as well. So these are issues that haven't gone away, and whenever they're coming so thick and fast, I think it definitely leads to, a fear that the police need to have fundamental reform placed on them. And in Northern Ireland, we had that. My first 2 years of my career, we were the Royal Ulster Constabulary, George Cross. In my first 2 years of service, it became the Police Service of Northern Ireland. We had lots of sort of public scrutiny, community participation placed into policing. We had a uniform change, a name change. And I think, for the Met Police, I think the debate's definitely open there. And I think that there is a really strong argument for the Met to be reformed first and foremost, but policing across England and Wales and across probably the UK to be better reformed as well. But the Met, it's proven to be just too big for kind of that strategy to be put across. And I personally think it should probably be broken up, and it should be put into smaller areas that can be better controlled.
They know this is where their son was shot. How they process that information is a different matter.
Chris Matter!
Suddenly, Chris Cabba's mother and father were drawn not only into the criminal justice system,
No justice!
but into a fight to change it. There came one announcement after the next. First, that Mr. Cabba was unarmed. Then the police watchdog launched a homicide investigation, and the officer in question has been removed from operational duties, having been handed a criminal and gross misconduct notice.
Any other job, if you're under a criminal investigation, you should be suspended immediately. It shouldn't be 2 days, 3 days. It should be immediate. So we welcome the decision.
And the time that it's taken to suspend him, do you think that has damaged trust further between the community and the Met Police?
Yeah, 100%, because unless they're able to give a valid reason as to why someone under criminal investigation was not suspended immediately, there will be raised eyebrows. There'll be people who don't really understand why that happened.
Early this morning, across the river, the new Metropolitan Police Commissioner swore allegiance to the new King.
I will well and truly serve the King in the office of Constable, with fairness, integrity, diligence and impartiality.
And then Sir Mark Rowley set out his mission.
We must renew policing by consent, and I'm determined that under my commissionership we will deliver more trust, less crime and high standards.
An overflowing in trade, that's the metaphor that's often used in these big transitional moments of public office. But perhaps a more accurate visual for the Metropolitan Police is a filing cabinet full of scandals, historical and recent, that have undermined public trust.
In the last couple of years, officers were jailed for sharing photographs of the murdered sisters Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman. A serving officer, Wayne Cousins, was jailed for Sarah Everard's murder. A unit based at Charing Cross Police Station were found to be sharing racist, misogynistic and homophobic messages. And a report found that the Met had been institutionally corrupt in their handling of the Daniel Morgan murder case. Over the next few days, millions are expected to arrive in the city to pay their respects to Her late Majesty the Queen. Policing this, the Commissioner says, is his first priority.
And in the last few minutes, the Metropolitan Police have confirmed that they have suspended the police officer involved in this case.
Thank you so much for that. And a bit of a fun question. What are your hobbies outside of policing?
Outside of policing, I ended up, as I said, I got hit by a car, bust my knee. I used to do a bit of kickboxing and MMA, used to play rugby. You can tell whenever you see me that I don't do it that often anymore. I like to read. I get bored at times. I actually studied and become a hypnotherapist. Whenever I literally bust my knee, was off for a while, so studied and become a hypnotherapist. Done a positive psychology course as well called the Thrive program and become a consultant for them. So I was doing that bit, as you said, it's just about being passionate about really changing things. And I think if you look at things in the positive rather than the negative, I think your mind opens up a lot. So the power language and stuff like that, just what makes people tick, why people behave in certain ways, I've always had a real interest in that.
That makes a lot of sense. Now I know how you select which articles to put on your Twitter feed. That makes a lot of sense. And what advice would you give to young people that want to follow in your footsteps as a police officer?
I would say most definitely do it. Change will never happen from the outside alone. We need people like yourself, like me, coming into policing to help shape the minds of recruits, helping to share lived experiences, to increase the cultural competence of the police service. 1/5, almost a fifth of the population are from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds across England and Wales, yet only 8% of our police services. So, that's a big gap in knowledge and experience. So young people coming into the police service, it is a rewarding career. Hopefully we will continue to push and we will see changes coming in. I think like any system, whenever you try to push on it and change, it tends to push back a little bit. And I think you can feel that a little bit at times. But whenever we get enough people coming in, that's where I think people will find their voice a lot more. People will challenge things and then we will, that culture will change. So please come in. Don't be afraid to come forward. The MBPA will be there to support you if there's any issues. Seek us out. Make sure that you're there. We will provide that kind of wraparound support that's needed for everybody. But change will not happen without people coming forward.
Thank you so much. And there was an incident in Ashford where a Black pupil was attacked, and it's attracted national attention. What are your thoughts on this incident and ultimately the current race relations in the UK?
Well, first of all, whenever we see it, it was a deeply traumatic video for anybody that did see it. I think that the trauma of seeing a child being attacked in any way, shape or form, I think is traumatic in itself. But what compounds that trauma is the fact that there were so many adults around who didn't step in, particularly the teachers as well. And I'm not going to say it's, a video is a small snapshot in time of what's happened, but it certainly appeared that there was a little bit more that could have been done at the time. We, as an association, reached out to Surrey Police. We did assist them with trying to formulate their approach, making sure that the victim and her family were looked after, that some of the comms were right and stuff as well, because I think the initial press release didn't mention a racist incident and stuff like that. So I think for me, the biggest thing is that understanding that just because it happens in Surrey, there's a ripple effect that goes across our communities, Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities. We've come to this country over many different years, so we have, but our family and our friendship circles go across the UK, go out wider than that as well, globally as well. So, I'm in WhatsApp groups that cover all of Ireland, that link across to London and Birmingham and other places, and communities in Belfast were deeply traumatized by that incident as well. So for me, it's just that understanding that happens in one area, it impacts everybody. You said the state of race relations at the minute, I think we've seen a regression, for sure. And I think if you go back to the 30s, before the Second World War, with the rise of Nazis and things like that, that was after a really big recession as well. So I think it's no coincidence that we have a big recession with a financial crisis in 2008, austerity kicking in then at this point, and then all of a sudden we have almost people being played off against each other whenever they're being hit financially and stuff. So I think, Brexit helped with some of that. You have, the whole things about people in positions of power, like the ex-President Trump, and some of the things that used to be on the fringes of public discussion that have now been mainstreamed. I think that has empowered some people to speak up. And again, for people like me and yourself, I would say that we probably always knew that it was still there. We could still feel it. But there was a certain amount of protection that people may have felt like saying certain things, but couldn't, or didn't feel that they could. And now people just feel more empowered to kind of come out with just abhorrent racist comments in, mainstream media and other places. So for me, I think we need to make sure that, as almost a fifth of our community come from a different ethnic group, we need to understand again that there is so much more that binds us and brings us together than there is that tears us apart. And we just need to find that commonality rather than constantly looking for the difference. But to do that, we have to admit first that there are a number of structures, there's a number of issues that have, that have created intergenerational trauma, that has, created certain perceptions and systemic issues which we need to really deal with. So I think there has been a conversation since George Floyd's murder around that in BLM, but I think that needs to continue, and we just need to be as inclusive as we can be, because I don't think diversity and inclusion is as big a threat as what some are making out. I think diversity and inclusion, making sure that we are as inclusive as we can be, is always a good thing. Why would you want somebody to feel lesser than you? Why would you not want somebody to be the best they can be and have the same opportunities as everybody else? For me, that's something that everybody should have the opportunity to do. So I think just, what we need is safe and cohesive communities, and we need to make sure that we just understand the difference in all of our communities, that we respect the difference, but, play really up strongly to the similarities.
Thank you so much for that. And what the last question I'd like to ask you is, actually, there's actually two. So the commissioner mentioned that 2 or 3 officers will face trial for crimes such as violence against women and dishonesty each week. What do you think are some of the root causes of this culture, and do you think this approach is strong?
I think, one, I don't think it is strong enough. I think the commissioner's response to all of the issues that have been raised in Baroness Casey's report and stuff is not to deal with the systemic issues which we're chatting about. It's the increased department that has been proven to disproportionately target Black and Asian people within the Metropolitan Police Service. So again, rather than reform it, what you're doing is upgrading it and giving more people. So we're probably going to see more disproportionality if we don't get onto it. I think we need to be proactive about getting that, but we need to make sure that we don't just have those kind of lower levels of the organization that display these behaviors. I think there's reasons, there's decision makers that have made decisions on both Dave Carrick, on Wayne Couzens and others who allowed them to continue in the police service unabated for quite a while. Those people need to be held to account as well, because those decisions have as big an impact as the behaviors that they have. And whilst that behavior is absolutely, you couldn't condemn it enough. You know what I mean? The behaviors that they've had it's the worst offences you could ever deal with, but they were allowed to get away with certain offences and certain incidents for 20 plus years. So I think we need that root and branch. It doesn't go far enough. I think it's I would say reassuring that there's so many people being rooted out, and we will have a period where we're reviewing certain cases that we are going to have this kind of almost purge of those that shouldn't be in the police service. But we also need to just make sure that we are proactive in moving forward, because if we just allow it to wait for a complaint to come through to then deal with it, then we're never going to manage it. And I know Sir Mark Rowley's mentioned some of that, but again, what's a representation of those officers that he's bringing in? What's a representation of DSE in the Met at the minute? Do they understand the cultural difference and things that drive certain behaviours? We need to empower officers on the front line to challenge all of those bad behaviours, to report wrongdoing, and not to be suspicious of each other, but just we need everybody to be doing the behaviours that we expect them to. Being a police officer is a privilege. You sitting in uniform, having the ability to take somebody's liberty, to breach or to engage their human rights at different times. All of these things need to be measured and controlled as well. So all of the bits around racism and other behaviours being in other walks of life don't have the ability. They're not armed. They don't have the ability to come into your house at 4 o'clock in the morning and completely uproot your life searching for things. So we need to make sure that everything's kind of done proportionately. But for me, I think it's dealing with the systemic stuff rather than just, kind of getting that low hanging fruit. We need, fundamental changes. We need to attack the structural differences and the structural issues that allow behaviours like this to breed in the first place.
Just on your point of kind of removing those systemic issues, I think probably one of the biggest challenges the Met is going to face is there's going to be those who traditionally know what the Met stands for and those that are coming in wanting to change the culture. How do you think that can be effectively managed?
I think, we went through it in PSNI between Protestants and Catholics. We went from 8% of the workforce in 2001 to 32% of the workforce for Catholic officers in 2011. Having a large influx of people that have different perceptions, that have different lived experiences, it was definitely challenging. There were a number of issues and a lot of clashes of perspectives. The way we had to deal with it was by creating more or less a completely neutral working environment. So we had to make sure that there was absolutely nothing brought in that would be symbols and pictures and all of these kind of things. I think that was probably the wrong approach, and I think we're in, PSNI wise, we're starting to think like that as well. That it was needed probably at the time, but it didn't allow people then to express their difference. I think the way to do it is by strong leadership training for sergeants and inspectors, so that they know how to manage people that have those different backgrounds and differences, how to manage conflict slightly better in the workplace, because at the minute we don't really have training for sergeants, inspectors, or you move up to the next level and it's basically sink or swim. You know what I mean? You literally either get really good or you learn on the job. The training that we get isn't always as effective as it could be. So I think having people trained up, taking lessons from other places, because I think that's the one thing the Met doesn't always do that well. I think it's just a symbol of big city policing, is that we're the most, and the things I get told all the time as an officer from Northern Ireland is that, London's such a difficult environment. It's so dangerous. I'm kind of like, hang on, dude. I sit and drive about in an armoured police car. I check under my car for a bomb in the morning. You want to chat about dangerous environments, but we still treat people with courtesy and respect. And there are lots of issues in Northern Ireland, and racism. We were the only police service that actually policed the Black Lives Matter protest, gave out over 70 tickets, tried to prosecute the organisers under the Serious Organised Crime Act. So there's lots of things that we need to fix here as well. But we have been through that culture change. We have had that shock to the system, and there are lessons that could definitely be shared. So I think it's not being humble enough to find out where those lessons could be learned, and then humble enough to kind of asking for that help and assistance rather than only we can sort this out. You know what I mean?
Thank you so much for that. And the last question I'd like to ask you is, what milestones do you hope the Met will achieve in 2023 to 2024 that will enable the force to reconnect with the communities in which it serves?
Again, I think the biggest thing that could be happening is community policing. Once you have a majority white workforce that live in the leafy suburbs outside London, the first time that they get the diversity that is within London is whenever they're faced with somebody that they're stopped searching. They don't understand that it's not them that the person's attacking, it's a uniform that you're wearing. It's understanding that history and that legacy of being let down and that lack of trust and confidence. I think that's the key bit. But if you're constantly getting your information from the media, from social media about what Black people are like, and then you come into certain areas and the only interaction you have with them is through the enforcement of the law, through use of police powers like stop and search, like arrests, like going to domestic violence, all of these different incidents that you go to, you end up getting your bias and racism certainly confirmed. So through the cognitive process of confirmation bias, you're going to end up reinforcing those negative stereotypes and beliefs that you have about the community. Having those informal spaces where you can engage better with the community, one, it allows the officers to see the best in the community and beyond that small minority that are involved in gang violence and knife crime and all this kind of stuff, because it's not the entire community. There are small sections of the community who are involved in criminality, involved in gangs, who are coercing and exploiting the rest of the community, and policing at this time is allowing them to happen. So officers getting to see the best and the good side of the community, but also then the community getting to see beneath the uniform at the individual underneath, community policing for me is the backbone of what we need to do. And I always say that community engagement is crime prevention. So again, I was at a tournament today which brought together young Somali kids, brought together young Protestant and Catholic kids from Northern Ireland. One's from just over the border in the Republic of Ireland come up, all of them playing football together, all of them getting to know each other, and things like that. So that's the kind of things that we need to do. That allows people to see police officers. They didn't believe I was a police officer initially, because I was chatting to them okay. You know what I mean? But that, for me, that community engagement needs to be seen through the lens of crime prevention. I think then there's a number of other things you need to be doing around tracking and tracing our misconduct through the service. Looking at your recruitment and looking at your promotion prospects as well, and making sure that we're looking at all of that data. So for me, creating a more representative workforce, having more community outreach, and not just being, what we tend to do in policing terms is send neighbourhood teams out to do that community policing. And that's brilliant because you need long-term people in communities, but you also need those in response teams and armed response teams and TSG and other places to come in and understand that as well. So the representative workforce, community engagement, and I think stronger public scrutiny around a lot of the things that are happening at a more localised level. So, we have a lot through MOPAC and through the Mayor's office, but at a local level, that Chief Inspector, Superintendent that's in charge of Croydon or Hackney or wherever, them coming to meet the community regularly to chat about stop search stats, to chat about incidents that's ongoing, allowing the community to tell them how they would like to see the policing footprint across their area. That, for me, is the three things that I think would allow big changes. And we'll see how that kind of unfolds in the next couple of years.
Thank you so much for a brilliant interview, Andy. It's just been an honour just to have you on the platform.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
David Carrick's crimes were unspeakably evil. The treatment that he subjected his victims and the survivors to was truly degrading and inhumane. Their courage has been extraordinary in coming forward and helping today him be brought to justice. Their courage is admirable, but we in policing have failed. He should not have been a police officer. There were many signs that we should have joined together. He should have been rooted out during his career as a police officer. It's upsetting to be stood here talking about this, and I apologise again to the victims, and indeed I apologise to the women of London, many of whom I'm sure will be troubled, and their trust in policing will be shaken by these events. We recognise as police officers that we have a big task ahead if we're to regain that trust. I have tens of thousands of colleagues, men and women, who really care about policing London and recognise the scale of that challenge and what needs to be done. I've been really clear from day one as Commissioner 4 months ago that one of the challenges for me was to root out those that corrupt the integrity of the Metropolitan Police. And this case and others like it illustrate that challenge. Today is not a day for going through action plans. Today is a day for reflection and apologising to victims. But I have been very clear, we will update at the end of March with the progress that we've made as we go step by step to tackle these issues and remove those that shouldn't be serving as police officers. We won't resolve this overnight, but as we lift the stones and deal with what's underneath it, you will see progress month by month, quarter by quarter. I finished where I started. I apologise to the women of London. I repeat my admiration for the women who came forward, and I promise the people of London we will do better and we will give you the police service you deserve.